Messages such as I'm going to preach tonight are completely out of style in this country. You'll have to be a spiritual Christian to accept what I preach tonight. If you're carnal, you probably won't like what I have to say, because I'm going to speak tonight concerning some heinous things in the history of Christianity. I want every boy and girl to especially listen tonight. If parents are sitting near to them, I'd appreciate if you'd make them listen. I want every young man and young woman to listen carefully to this message tonight. Preaching on subjects like this is completely out of style in this country, and it's one of the reasons that we're in the condition that we're in tonight. We like to forget about history, ugly things in history. We like to tuck them away in history books on the shelves and let the dust gather on them and forget about history. But we shouldn't forget about history, and there's one reason we should not forget about history. The man in history is the same as man today. And what man would do in history, he'd do again today. And therefore we must watch history and study history, especially Christians, and see what's happened to the faith in times past, because the devil's still alive and man's nature is the same as it was in history. And the same things that happen in history can happen today. And I know that intellectually people don't accept that. They say, we're educated. We've changed. The world's too smart. Things that happened in history can't happen again today. We're too brilliant for that. I think World War II would negate that. After all of our study and intellectualism and learning, and with Germany being one of the most educated societies in all the world, the heinous things that could ever be done by man was done in Germany just a few years ago. Burning people in furnaces. And I don't have to go into all the things that happened, but that was an intellectual country that did that. So we need to look at history. And tonight, we look at Ireland. Ireland. Island in the North Atlantic called the Emerald Isle because it's so green. It rains so much there that the grass is the greenest green that you can imagine under normal conditions. And it's called the Emerald Isle. It's about the size of the state of New Jersey, 300 miles from the northernmost point to the southernmost point, and about 150 miles across it at the widest point. About the size of New Jersey. But tonight, we're not so much interested in Ireland as Northern Ireland. Ireland was broken up into divisions, and they each bore names. Leicester was an accumulation of counties. Munster was an accumulation of counties. And up to the north, there were 6 counties known as Ulster. Ulster and Northern Ireland are one and the same. Now on that continent, or on that island of Ireland, the Emerald Isle, back before civilization and education, there were Celtic tribes, barbaric people, ran and fought their enemies with vicious swords, crudely caught fish and ate them. Barbaric people lived on that island. When Christ lived on this earth, barbarians lived on that island known as Ireland. They lived in barbaric heathenism until St. Patrick, so-called, went to that island about 700-800 years after Christ and evangelized it and turned it from barbarism to Christianity. Some say that he was a priest, but there's no record that he ever celebrated a mass, no record that he ever heard a confession, no record that he ever wore clerical garments. In fact, St. Patrick was an evangelist who preached the gospel of Christ, pure and simple. And barbaric people on the island of Ireland believed upon Christ and became Christians. But the only missionary effort in the world done at that time was being done by the Church of Rome. It wasn't long until missionaries from Rome invaded the island, took the Christians, the people who professed Christianity, and established Roman Catholicism as the religion of Ireland. Now, at that time, Britain was quickly, steadily becoming the most powerful nation in the world. They were spreading out, conquering other people. The kings of England had already begun to build mighty armies and to spread their empire. And Britain came across the waters to Ireland and conquered it. And Ireland was under British rule. They had their own language, Gaelic, and their island in Gaelic was pronounced Erie rather than Ireland. With the Gaelic language and the Roman Catholic religion, they began to give Britain problems. These Celtic tribes began to fight the British armies. Now, Britain always had ruthless means of conquering people. And one scheme that they've practiced so many places in the world was when they conquered a people and were ruling over them, and that group of people started to give them trouble, they would import people from other countries and plant them in the conquered country, so that the conflict would be between the people and the people that had moved in rather than with the government. That was a trick of Britain, and they practiced it in so many places. Now, when the original people of Ireland chafed under British rule and began to fight the British government, Britain practiced their trick. They went over to Scotland, which on a clear day you can see from Ireland, and they herded up groups of people. They promised them farmland and prosperous living if they would move from Scotland to Ireland. And under the pressure of the British government, they moved hundreds and hundreds of Scottish people to Northern Ireland. They did not go down to the south of Ireland, they came into the north. Those people that came over from Scotland were Presbyterians that had just come through the Reformation led by John Knox that turned every Roman Catholic church in Scotland into a Protestant church, namely Presbyterian. They had just come through the times of the Covenanters when 18,000 people died for the cause of Christ. Strong and sturdy and staunch and blue-blooded Protestants they were, unwilling ever to bow their knee to Rome, unever again to ever look to the Roman Catholic Church, staunch Protestants, and they moved them into Ireland, in the northern part. So a beachhead for Protestantism was established in Northern Ireland in the 6 counties of the north known as Ulster. Now, the non-Protestants of Ireland did not like that, and neither did they like the British government. So this that happened, which I'm going to talk about tonight, all started in 1641. Irish nationalists, or people who had always lived in Ireland, that resented these Scotch people living on their island and resented the Protestant faith, started a rebellion against the British government and against Protestantism. The massacre started in 1641, just about the time the Puritans were landing in America. They started in the south of Ireland, and they had no problems because that was a total non-Protestant population. But they swept up northernward, and they took Dublin and Dublin Castle and took the reins of the government of Ireland, and then they began northward, moving on up in to Northern Ireland where the Protestants were. They were attempting to do 2 things: overthrow the British government and drive out the Protestants and eliminate Protestantism. These men were savage and ruthless fighters, and they began to move upon the Protestant population. At Newry, where we stayed just recently, and Dromore, another town in the north, and Dungannon, where we've preached, great massacres took place. Killing of Protestant people to drive Protestantism out of the country. There were a few cities that were strong enough to resist this. Enniskillen, a city in which we just preached, was a stronghold for Protestantism, and not many people were killed there. And Coleraine upon the Atlantic coast was another, and Belfast was untouched by this rebellion. But other places were not so protected. In a place, Lochhill, they took 300 people, and with the priest giving the orders to the Roman Catholic fighters, they herded 300 people into a church, locked the doors, and burned the church. Just recently, when we were in the country, we were driving through to preach for a preaching engagement, and we stopped to eat supper in a place called Portadown. At a bridge right at the edge of Portadown, they took 196 Protestants and drowned them in the river in one day. Altogether in Portadown, 1,000 people were killed because they were Protestants. They left dead bodies lying in rivers, in towns, in cities. Disease set into those bodies, dead, unburied, lying in fields and on the streets of cities. And a plague broke out that took over 6,000 more lives of Protestants and Roman Catholics. That was the massacre of 1641. Led by a man by the name of O'Neill, Sir Philip O'Neill, a Roman Catholic, led in that massacre. If you question the validity of these facts, you merely need to go to Trinity University the most distinguished university in all of Ireland, in Dublin, which is a Roman Catholic institution. And in the history department in the library of Trinity University in Dublin, there are 32 volumes that document everything that I'm telling you tonight, even to the numbers of deaths that took place in certain places, even to the names of people that were killed and names of men who led in the massacre. It's there in 32 volumes in Trinity University in Dublin. A few years passed, the massacre continued, a continuous killing. My great-great-great-grandfather, William Guyler, left the shores of Ireland in 1703 and came to this country. The massacre was still going on. He escaped for his life because a Roman Catholic neighbor came and told him that they were planning to kill him. And he fled and came to this shore. But the event of which I am going to talk about tonight took place in 1688. The massacre took place in 1641. In 1688, Charles II, King of England, had died. Now, Charles I, King of England, was a non-Protestant and a vicious man. Puritans, so named because they believed in pure religion, not altogether purity of life, but pure from ecclesiastical machinery and pure from corrupt denominations, had pulled out of Roman Catholicism and also out of the Episcopal Church, the King of England, the Church of England, and they were independent Christians just like you and I, and because they pulled out of the impure denominations, they were known as Puritans. There were many Puritans in England at this time, and their leader was a man by the name of Oliver Cromwell, a blue-blood, staunch Protestant, born-again Christian. And King Charles I was so vicious toward the Christians in England that Oliver Cromwell and the Puritan leaders took Charles I and beheaded him. And England had no king, and Oliver Cromwell ran the government of England through Parliament, he being the parliamentary leader. Oliver Cromwell had a Christian country in England, and Protestants were no longer in danger of losing their lives. Protestants could worship freely. There was a preaching of the Word of God. There was an evangelization of the lost. Oliver Cromwell, the leader of Parliament, protected the Christians, and Christianity flourished in England. Oliver Cromwell died. His son was a weak man, and it wasn't long till the people said, "We want a king. This son of his can't run this country. He can't run the Parliament. We want a king." When Charles I was beheaded by Cromwell, his son Charles II fled to the Hebrides Islands, just east of Scotland. When Oliver Cromwell died, the people sought Charles II and brought back him and established him as King of England. Now, he is mad at the Christians because they killed his father. He is angry with Parliament. He is angry with Protestants because they cut off the head of his father. So Charles II, who was bisexual, fathered 32 children to 17 different women. Scum of the earth, Charles II. And he made the people of Protestant Scotland declare that they would recognize him as King of the church. He had no problem with that in England because he forced it, but the Reformation had taken place in Scotland. People had turned to be blue-blood Protestants, and when Charles II said, "You'll recognize me as King of the church," 18,000 of them dipped a pen in their own blood and signed a covenant with their own blood. We'll never recognize Charles II as King of the church. We'll recognize him as King of Scotland, but never King of the church, because only Jesus is King of the church. We stood not long ago and saw where 18,000 people were put to death because they wouldn't bow their knee to Charles II. Now there's a real conflict between Protestantism and Roman Catholicism, but Charles II, immoral man that he was, a man who was bisexual, and a man who put to death thousands and thousands of Christians, died. James I became King of England, and he was angry at Protestants, and he decided to do away with what the Reformation had done. The Reformation had turned people to become Protestants. There wasn't any way that James I could turn them back. His way of doing away with the Reformation and doing away with Protestantism was simple: kill the Protestants. Do away with what Martin Luther did by killing Protestants. That was his aim. That's what he set out to do. Kill Protestants. In 1688, the killing began in Ireland. James I sent his armies over to Ireland to rid Ireland of Protestantism. They began once more in October 1688 to march upon Protestant people, the armies of King James. They slaughtered them wherever they came. On Tuesday, December 2nd, 1988, a man found a letter on the street of Belfast. No one knows how that letter got there except through the providence of God, but it indicated that on December the 9th there was going to be a great massacre of Protestants. They'd already killed many. This letter was sent throughout the province, letting everybody know, December the 9th, December the 9th, December the 9th, there's going to be a great massacre, like the St. Valentine's Day massacre, St. Bonaventure Day massacre. There was going to be a great massacre of Protestants in Northern Ireland. The armies of James I went after them and ran them down and killed Protestants by the hundreds until they conquered the whole land. And what Protestants that were left in the country worked their way up, going toward the ocean, going northward, going toward the ocean, until they came to a city called Londonderry. Londonderry is one of the most beautiful cities in all the world. I don't know of any city that's so unique. I love to go there just to see it. You come in over the mountain and you look down at it, and it's two sweeping mountains come down. And in the middle is the River Foyle. And here are rows of houses lapping up over the sweeping mountains this way, and rows of houses sweeping up over the mountains this way, and the river going down between. And on a cool night in Northern Ireland, when there's smoke coming out of every chimney of every house, it's something to see on a clear night. That's Londonderry. Now at Londonderry, the Protestants had been forced to their last refuge. This letter reached Londonderry 2 days before the massacre was to take place. The people of the city all came together. There was a man in charge, Reverend James Gordon. All the people gathered in Londonderry. Protestants that had running ahead of the king's army had come there for refuge. All of these Protestants got inside of Londonderry, which had walls around it. They got in there for refuge. And then there were all the inhabitants of Londonderry. And they said, what are we going to do? Every city in Northern Ireland has been hit by King James armies. They've been slaughtered. Now they're coming here. In 2 days there's going to be a massacre. What are we going to do? A man by the name of Reverend James Gordon said, we'll shut the gates of the city. Now there was in Londonderry, which was a Protestant town, a bishop by the name of Bishop Hopkins. He was a traitor, Protestant Episcopalian. He said, we live under King James and we have no right to turn he or his armies away. We have to submit to the government. We have to live under the king. Don't shut the gates. Let him and his army come in. We'll plead mercy. I'm sure they'll be merciful to us. There won't be any massacre. We live under the king. We're to honor the king. Oh, compromising, apostate bishop, telling the people, King James' army will never hurt us when they get here. We'll just do what we're supposed to do. We're under his authority. But Reverend James Gordon said, shut the gates of the city and we'll stand. Nobody would shut the gates. 13 boys. 13 teenage boys. Known as the apprentice boys because they were all learning trades under their father or some other man teaching them. 13 boys. When men would do nothing, when government leaders would do nothing, when officials would do nothing, 13 teenage boys ran down the hill, took the chains of the gate and pulled the drawbridge up and shut the gates of the city of death. Their names are in infamy. Henry Campsey, William Crookshanks, Robert Sherrard and his brother Daniel Sherrard, Alexander Irwin, James Stewart, Robert Morrison, Alexander Cunningham, Samuel Hunt, James Spike, John Cunningham, William Carnes, Samuel Harvey. 13 boys shut the gates and said, we'll stand. The British Army sent a man up. James first sent a man ahead of the armies by the name of Colonel Lundy. He wanted to talk to the people. They let down the gate and Colonel Lundy came in. He was a traitor. He told them that if you'll just surrender, you'll be protected, you'll have religious freedom. When he was King James' adversary and advocate to throw that city into the massacre.